Hey, it's Keith from Outlaw Speed Shop, and in this episode of the Four Horsemen, we're tackling a T-bucket. And the theme? Something Eddie Munster would drive. This was definitely out of the box. So, as stated, this is the Four Horsemen October build. And up is this casting of I believe it's supposed to be a Spectra Flame style. I think it's the classics, the T-bucket. And the theme is Eddie Munster. And it would be something that Eddie Munster would drive. And I actually had a hard time with this. You'd think this one would be pretty easy for me. It wasn't. This has got a metal base, and it's got an engine which is held together with a couple clips onto the body itself, which includes the front end of the chassis. And then it's got a window that is clipped in, and then the interior, which is clipped into that. So I kind of, I went back and forth. I wasn't sure. I'm like, what would Eddie Munster drive? I could have gone spooky, so I had this diaper. I think it's a diaper dragger. I figured that motor was perfect. It's kind of over the top, the twin snorkels. It fit. Seemed like it was a good idea at the time, and I naturally break out my cutoff disc, which I use for everything, and pretty much started slicing up the motor to see if I could get it to fit. And it took a little bit of trimming. I had to cut the bell housing off the back. I had to trim a little bit on the front. But I had a certain, I mean, I could only put it so close to the fender wall, or the firewall, excuse me, and I didn't want it to overhang too much on the front end because I still wanted to use the radiator and grill, I guess you'd call it a grill shell, and the headlights from the other motor. So after a little bit of trimming, you can see right there, I'm kind of sizing up the other one, and that whole front piece is actually clipped into the motor. There's two little prongs that kind of stick into the plastic motor housing, and pretty much leaves you with the radiator with the headlights. You got to cut the tabs off, obviously, to get it to fit, but that's seemed like it was a good idea, and it fit. The big part about finding the right motor was finding one that wasn't overly wide to fit the narrowing front clips. So I didn't want the side pipes being metal, a little bit more of a challenge. I have to cut it off as opposed to just snipping it off like if it was a plastic base. But the cutoff wheel makes fairly short work of it. Pretty much I just cut it and then I'll just grind it down a little bit and then file it smooth, so I have some nice smooth frame rails for the look. Those wheels you see in the background came off a M2 ground pounder. I believe it was the 53 Chevy pickup. So I like the green, and it kind of fit with what I was going to be going with, and I like the wide whites. Just, yeah, personal choice. But because of the width and what I was after, I had to pretty much cut the wheel stoppers, the axle bend stopper, disc brake looking things that are on the front and the back. Again, cutoff disc is your friend. I know 90% of my videos is me using a Dremel tool because I cut the crap out of everything, but it is what it is. But it just gave me a little bit more flexibility. That increased, with those on there, it added a good 1/4 inch to the length of what I needed for the axles. So, and I know you guys are watching this waiting for me to cut my fingers off, but I don't. I've been wearing a Band-Aid, if you notice, on my right hand, and that had nothing to do with me. I was actually holding something for somebody who was trying to drill a piece of steel with a hole saw, and he was an apprentice at my other job, and he let it slip, and it pretty much hacked my fingernail. So I'm waiting for it to grow out, and so far I have not ripped it off. You know how it is when you get a piece of nail right in the middle. It was right down by the cuticle too. It was horrible. So I punched him in the head. But anyways, so I have to make axle tubes, and I'm using aluminum. I usually use brass, but I had bought some aluminum, and the M2 axles are a little bit bigger than the Hot Wheels. So I did not record what size it is. I want to say it's 3/32 aluminum tubing from K&S. So don't quote me on it, but I'm pretty sure that's what it is. And the M2 wheels are glued onto the axle. So to get them off, you just kind of twist, you know, against each other, back and forth, and one side will usually pop off, and then you just have to glue it back on once you stick it through the axle tubing itself, and you're pretty much just creating one solid axle that rotates inside the tube as opposed to the wheels rotating on the axle. So it's a one-piece deal, if that made any sense whatsoever. I'm horrible at explaining things. Paul over at Diecast Graveyard can explain anything and make it sound interesting, and I would suck as a teacher. So, but anyways, obviously when you're using a axle tube, the diameter is wider, so the slot that the original axles sat in needs to be widened. Or if you want, obviously, if you want the car to sit lower, you can actually leave it as is. This didn't work out that way, so I wanted a little spot for it to sit in because of the way the nose of the is like a faux gas tank on the front, so it just wouldn't have worked out to do that. The back, obviously, again, because the axle's being wider, you have to kind of widen out the holes that would normally hold down the axle to compensate for the wider axle tubes, and it seemed to work out pretty decent. That's kind of where I'm at right there. I didn't alter the stance. I kept it pretty much the way it came from Hot Wheels, which is rare because I never do that. So one of the things getting into the Eddie Munster part was, the windshield is, normal height for a T-bucket. So we gotta cut that shit off and make it like a chopped windshield. So that way, if there was a top that went on it, it would be kind of a raked top, and there's no need to have a windshield that tall. You're not supposed to be cool, and obviously having a full windshield, it's like windshields on the front of the bikes, just not a fan. But anyways, so that's what I did with that, and what I end up doing is stripping the body. It's a shame because it's a nice body. It was obviously polished for the Spectraflame paint that Hot Wheels put on it, so I already had a good surface, and it's a prime candidate for a killer paint job, which is exactly what I didn't do. So I'm going to paint everything, and that way it'll give me a little bit of a base to work with. I was going for a certain look on this, and again, going with the Eddie Munster theme, it's left up to interpretation, but I would think Eddie Munster would keep things black, So I went with the Chaos Black spray from Citadel, which again I use in every video. Excuse me. It's a semi-matte black. I think it was perfect for this build, and you can't really get much better than that. I could have gone gloss. I could have gone a custom 60s or 70s or, something like that. But I didn't think he would be into that. So naturally, I'm going to make a shifter, because nothing cooler than a T-bucket having a big shifter sticking out of the, visible. So I got my Citadel skull. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a skull. I'm going to drill a hole in the bottom with the smallest bit I have, which came in my pin vise set. And then I'm going to take the piece of metal that I cut, or the rod, was 0.025, I believe, K&S piano wire, which I would use for like an axle if I was going to make an axle from scratch. And it fits perfectly. It looks to scale for a shifter. Right there, I'm just kind of trimming the doohickeys off it from the flashing from the sprue. And pretty much I'm going to end up painting the... here I'm just trying to get a rough height Again, it's kind of a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Obviously, a shifter handle is going to be, it's not always going to be straight up and down, so I'm putting a slight couple bends in it so it looks fairly right. And what I'll do is I'll glue a base on the bottom of that, so it makes it easy to install into the interior. I'll paint it the same color, and nobody will be the wiser. But try to get the right height, trying to take into account that I got a narrowed or trimmed down windshield, you know, and that I have to drill the skull a little bit, which is really a pain in the neck because it's a little skull. You know, but it's, you know, I'm going to lose an eighth or so sitting inside the skull. So, yeah, it doesn't have to be perfect, and I'm not trying to make it perfect. And then now it's just painting. So I pretty much painted everything with the Chaos Black. And what that does is it gives me a good base to work with. So I painted the, you know, the gas tank on the front, kind of like a moon tank, I guess you could say, with the lead belcher, doing some of the engine highlights with the lead belcher. And I'm going to say lead belcher one more time for those people who like to hear me say lead belcher. So a little bit of, I believe this is Retributor Armor. These are Citadel paints, by the way. I'm using that's like a copper color, goldish copper. I'm using for the carburetors. Yellow I'm going to use for the headlights on the original radiator grill support that came with the T-bucket. I'm going to paint the inside black. I put a skull on that as well, and I did both skulls, the shifter and the one on the radiator support grill shell, chrome as well, just almost like an emblem on a car. And then pretty much I'm just going to go around and do some highlights, and I kind of left it, you know, dark, I guess you could say, which to me kind of fit the theme. Again, that's what's great about these Four Horsemen builds is everybody has their own interpretation, and I actually, you know, everybody does their own thing, and how I envision this is completely different than how Paul or any of the other Xavier or Joe, anybody that does this and participates. We all have our own vision, and that's what makes this awesome, you know. And all those who participate and join in, they all have their own visions. And, you know, it's a simple T-bucket casting, but there's probably going to be 10 or 15 variations of how we envision this to be, especially with an Eddie Munster theme. So speaking of which, coming up, I have a December one. We have this pickup truck that's a post-apocalyptic theme. And then December, we're doing a rat rod, which is a 32 Ford. So that ought to be cool. Feel free to join in. I always forget to invite people, but feel free to join in. So, this is pretty much the Hot Wheels casting straight out of the package. Nothing fancy. It's a cool looking casting. Theme is Eddie Munster. If you like the content, make sure you subscribe and don't forget to ring the bell to get notified of all future videos. This is what I ended up with. Make sure you check out the other Four Horsemen builds. The links will be in the description below. Hope you like it. I will catch you on the next one.